What's up, guys? Welcome back. Sorry again that it's been a while. I'm graduating college in about 3 weeks here, and it's been pretty hectic with school, so sorry for pumping out videos pretty slowly. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to animate the river scene that you just saw. Alright, so to get things started, we're going to add our ground layer in our riverbed. And to do this, I just made a grease pencil object. You can see that there's a little bit of color variation in here, but not really anything crazy. And then next, of course, we need the water. And this is literally just a blue layer with the opacity set to something around 50%, so that you can still kind of see through it. And I left a little spot open here for a rock, and you'll see why in a second. So next, you can see that it's kind of lackluster, so we're going to add some details into the riverbed. To do this, I started by adding some stones, and at first they're just a kind of green color. I'll show you without the water. And then I add on top a shadow, and then another outline for the stones. And you can see here that the reason that I have the water erased at this point above the stone is because I wanted it to seem like this big stone was poking out through the water. Without erasing the water above this big rock, this is what it would look like. And you can see that it makes everything just look kind of flat and two-dimensional, and whereas without it, it makes it feel like we can actually understand where the surface of the water is and have the rock poking out above it. So next up, I wanted to add some movement since rocks don't really move in a riverbed. So I did this by adding a plant and a fish. So here's the plant, super basic, just kind of wiggles, and the fish. The fish just kind of swims. Now you can see that right here where the water meets the rock, it makes it look more kind of like a pool rather than a moving river. And so to give it that effect, I added some splashing or some foaming around the edge where the rock meets the water. And this is just a super simple animation, but it gives it the perception that the water is moving from one way and exiting the other, because you have a splash on one side and not on the back side. So that's it for the grease pencil part. Now let's take a look at how we made the water surface. This is actually done with a blender material, not with a hand-drawn grease pencil object. So let's look at how we shaded that. So to begin, I just added a plane directly in front of the grease pencil object that you can see here. Coming back into the camera view and heading over to the shading tab, we start by making a new material. Alright, so to get things started, let's go ahead and get rid of this principal BDSF, and we'll add in a Voronoi texture. Using the node wrangler, we'll quickly add mapping and texture coordinates, and we'll change it from generated to UV, and we'll see why in a second. Under the Voronoi texture, let's change it from Euclidean to, F1 to distance to edge. We'll lower the scale down to something like 0.5. We're going to add in a noise texture. Use the same mapping vector to this vector, factor to randomness. And so we can see what this looks like here. It looks like pretty much just noise, but we want to isolate that so that it is either black or white. We're going to do that with a color ramp with a constant. Alright, so after adjusting some of the values a little bit and connecting the color node to the surface, we can see what we're getting at here. So next up, we're going to want to come into the edit mode, select the entire face, and select U and unwrap. And here now we'll go into the UV editing to make sure we're in rendered mode so we can see what we're working with here. And what we're going to want to do is slide either these top nodes to the left or to the right, and this will skew our mapping so that it makes it look like the water's running diagonally rather than just side to side straight across the screen. Since our camera angle that we have set up, the water's kind of moving diagonally. So we'll move this, looks like this direction, maybe by about that much. And we'll come back to the shading tab. And we'll see right now that if we move this mapping node in the X direction or the Y direction, that we get kind of the movement that we want. But it's a little bit too large. So we can fix this by scaling it down in all the axes. So we'll go Shift A, value, connect the value to that node, and now we can quickly zoom in and zoom out in all three directions, X, Y, and Z. So this looks pretty good. I might adjust this color ramp value just a little bit. You know, no, I'm pretty happy with that. So now this is what it looks like. So let's animate it now. And to do this, we will go to our first frame. We will press I to enter a keyframe. We'll go to our last frame and we'll move it some arbitrary amount. So maybe 4.5 in the X direction, and I want to go down a little bit this way. So maybe -1 in this direction. And let's see what that looks like. All right, pretty good. That's pretty much what I was going for here. So now we want it so that we keep only these black parts and that the white parts become transparent. So to do this, we are going to add an emission node, and this will be the color of our foam, which we will set to be a bluish color. And this is, once again, our foam color. And then we will add a transparent BDSF. We're going to mix these shaders together, and the factor is going to be determined by the color ramp. So the color ramp goes into the factor, shader goes into the surface, and we're going to come into the properties here, and in blend mode we need to select alpha clip, and you see that will allow us to see, make all the places that were black transparent. It'll make all the places that were white map to this emission shader here. So we can change this to be whatever color we want, and we can see that that will change the color of the water. But I liked where it was at right there. So now I might scale this out a little bit. I might decrease the scale of the noise just to play with these values a little bit. All right, and there we go. So now if we press play, we have something that looks a little bit better. And you can see when you're playing it that there's kind of like a black outline around all these things, and that's because that is the alpha clipping, and so when it's calculating just in the viewport, it doesn't really do a precise calculation, but when you render it, that black line will not be there. So the final thing to do is you can see that the surface of the water that we have made looks like it's going over the rock, and it makes it unrealistic, makes it feel like it's separate and just kind of like an overlayer. So we need to fix that, and to do that, we're going to pause on a frame where it looks like we have a good amount of foam overlapping the rock so that we can have an idea of where we need to edit. We're going to come back into layout. I'm going to tab in, do Control R to subdivide, and I'll do maybe this many. I try to make it match up with the, actually you know what? I'm going to make sure that we can see the rock entirely. And then I'm going to do tab, Command R. I'm going to subdivide it until it looks like I have enough subdivision. See here I have, starting at the front and the back, I've got lines, so that's pretty good. We'll do that, and then we'll subdivide in the other direction as well, looking for the same thing. So here we have lines on top and bottom. Doesn't need to be that way, but it just makes it easier to line it up. Press enter, So we need to erase all of these faces. And what we're going to do is by X faces. And now we're going to have a hole in our plane here. And if we play forward, we'll see that it just looks like a square hole. But we want to conform that to the shape of the rock poking through the surface. So to do that, we'll come into tab mode, go to vertex, and start dragging points down. Alright, so now if we play it back, we can see that the foam now goes around the rock as it should, and it actually kind of warps as it goes around it too, which seems kind of more realistic to me. Alright, that's it for today, guys. I'll be making a new video soon about lip syncing with cartoons for Blender Grease Pencil, so stay